Good evening, everyone. I am Arindam Goswami, and my teammates are Ayush Jha, Aniket Singh, and Avirup Pal. So, today's topic for our presentation is XML schema. Next. So, the agenda of today's discussions are what is XML schema, what are XML elements, what are the data types that we use in XML, what are namespaces, and the conclusion that we are going to draw after this discussion. Next. So, what is an XML schema? Next. So basically, it is known as extensible markup language. It is a markup language that defines a set of rules for encoding documents in a format which is both human readable and machine readable. It is basically designed to carry data, not to show data. Next. So now, what is the difference between an XML and HTML? So basically, the main major differences between XML and HTML are that XML is used to carry data, whereas HTML is used to display data. XML can create own tags, whereas HTML cannot create its own tags. XML is platform and language independent, whereas HTML is also not dependent language. XML tags and attributes are case sensitive, whereas HTML tags and are not case sensitive and quotes is not compulsory. All XML element must have a closing tag, and XML is used to create new internet languages such as WSDL, WAP, WML, etc. Now, the further slides will be discussed by my friend Ayush Jha. Thank you.
Thank you, Arindam Goswami. Next slide. So now we discuss where and why we can use XML. Let's discuss a scenario like there's a web server client, a web service client, or a server written in Java, in which we have to convert between its internal representation of data and character strings appropriate for representing data in SOAP document. SOAP is actually a API used in XML. So, for example, currency converter from dollars, like in web service, has to convert the Java to represent the amount of string. During this process, some questions may arise, like what could be the constant in the process, data range decision, value constraints, uses of scientific notation, precision issues, and ethics, and etc. And the solution to these questions will be discussed in the next slide. Next slide, please. So the one-step solution for all the questions that arise in the previous slide is XML schema used for defining a proper schema. Used for defining a proper used to describe data. It is a definition of collections of standard data types. An XML schema also contain a range of values that could be used for a particular data type, and then data on how to represent the values. In this way, we can use XML schema for creating our currency converter. Thank you. That's all from me. The next slides will be explained by my friend Aniket Singh.
Thank you, Ayush. Now we'll discuss about XML schema and its example. So first of all, that XML schema is a well-formed XML document. XML with correct syntax is well-formed XML. XML is validated against a DTD is a valid XML. So as you can see in this example for XML document, first of all we have to write the XML version with its encoding type, and then we have to define all the things that we want to discuss on the XML type. So these are some tags that is node, to, from, heading, and body. So this heading and body are used for the define the heading and body to get into the data of the document. Now the next slide we will discuss about XML element and vocabulary. So in the XML element part, an XML element is everything from including the element starting tag to ending tag. An element can contain other element, text, attributes, or a mix of all of the above, as you can see in this example. And now we'll talk about XML vocabulary. XML vocabulary is used to define elements and attribute names, element content, semantic of elements and attributes. Some of the CML vocabularies are XHTML, RSS, XL, and DTD and schema. And in the next slide, that is data types in XML schema, we'll talk about the data types. So there are two types of data types in XML schema. That is, first one is simple and the second one is complex. In the simpler type, there are two also, like the primitive, the built-in data type, and the second one user-defined data type. In the complex one, There's also the similar that is primitive built-in data type, and second one is user-defined data type. Now, further slides will be discussed by Mr. Friend, my friend Avirup Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniket Singh, for your the insight. Next slide, please. Now, taking a quick comparison between the simple data type and the complex data type, these are the two the vast difference, the vast contrast between these two are that is the values in simple data type. The values are represented by XML doc by character data, and in complex data type, values are represented using markup. That means they have a certain sequence in a complex data type, and in a simple data type, similarly, it is used to represent individual values, and in complex data type, it is used to represent structured data that is highly organized. Next slide, please. Uh, Next slide, please. Now, talking about the XML namespaces. Now, why do we use XML namespace? The XML namespace is basically used to avoid element name conflict in XML document. As we can see, it has a certain syntax. It follows the XML namespace follows a certain syntax. That is, a namespace starts with the keyword X, means the word name in the namespace prefix, and the URL in the namespace identifier. As we can see, I have also mentioned there's also we can also see an example that clear in the second line we can clearly see that it starts with XML version firstly, and in the second line it contains the XML.const. That is, it starts the namespace starts with it, and after that the namespaces prefix are declared, and finally the closing tag is given. It means it uses a series of markup language that are tagged, means the opening tag and closing tag are used respectively and efficiently in XML namespace. And finally, coming to the conclusion, next page please. And finally, from the above discussion, we can finally come to the conclusion that XML schema is a specific type. It used to carry all the data, and it doesn't show the it doesn't do to show the data. It is only used to carry the data. It is used in the Java programming languages basically, and it is in the format content. It is platform independent. Also in the schema, it is used to exchange data and description as we use in XML documents. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's all from us. We hope
Thank you
you
guys
have any
for all
questions for
your
us.
love and support. Like, share, and
And
subscribe.
please like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you,
Subscribe.
guys.
Yeah.
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Like, share, and subscribe.